The United Nations says more than 100,000 people fled Syria in August. That is the highest number in a single month since the conflict began almost a year and a half ago. Now, the majority fleeing the violence are going to Turkey, which has set up large refugee camps to house more than 80,000 people. And Jordan has also taken in more than 77,000. It now says it needs more aid to deal with this influx. Lebanon's system is much less regulated, with few resources for the 59,000 refugees believed to be there. Some have also gone to Iraq, although most are Iraqis who originally fled to Syria as refugees. The real numbers, though, could be much higher. This count only includes refugees who are registered or awaiting registration with the United Nations.
First, of course, points to a dramatic escalation in the numbers of people crossing borders and fleeing the violence. There are also huge numbers inside Syria who haven't crossed international borders. The estimate is at least 1 million people. So always, when you have bigger refugee numbers, it points to a worsening of the conflict, more violence, and just a terrible humanitarian situation. The numbers are overwhelming. All of these countries are stretched, and everybody needs more assistance. So all we can do is be prepared, and it is, though, quite a race to help these people as much as they deserve.
Now, the new head of the International Committee of the Red Cross has met the Syrian president in Damascus. The talks between Peter Maurer and Bashar al-Assad are being described as positive. The ICRC wants more access to civilians in affected areas. It also wants to be able to visit detention centers. Rights groups say tens of thousands of people are being held there. Guillaume Charron monitors displaced people in Syria for the internal displacement monitoring system. He joins us now from Geneva. A lot of discussion, a lot of focus on refugees fleeing Syria to neighboring countries. But what about the situation concerning IDPs, those internally displaced by the conflict in Syria?
Hello, Gida. Yes, well, as you know, the conflict's been happening for over a year and a half now. And as you've seen, Melissa, the UNHCR spokesperson, actually highlighted that there's been a peak in the conflict in the last 2 months. And this is also something that we have seen. Actually, we've seen the number increase dramatically to a point where now between 1 million and 1.5 million people have been displaced inside Syria, so Syrians that have left their homes inside Syria. And that number is about roughly 10 times the number of people who have sought refuge outside of Syria.
But how do you get to this number? I mean, is this a conservative estimate, given the limited access, I would imagine, that there is to some of these areas where violence is still raging?
That is indeed what we notice. I mean, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent actually comes out with these numbers, with these estimates. But it is indeed, we know, as the president mentioned, they managed to reach only 2/3 of the people that have been displaced internally. So as a result, we can imagine that the picture is much more dramatic than it actually is. And one thing that we have noticed as IDMC is that a lot of the discussion are centered around refugees, and not enough is done to actually raise the plight of those people that are suffering inside Syria.
And what impact is this internal displacement having on communities that are already struggling to get by?
Well, that is where actually the most dramatic changes have happened and that we have seen, because whereas before the people that were displaced inside of Syria were actually a consequence of the conflict, increasingly we are seeing that their situation is mixed with the conflict and they're becoming part of the conflict. What I mean by that is that people flee their homes and seek safe havens in other host communities, which creates another level of stress with these host communities, who, by the way, have been protesting quite a lot for meager resources that they may have. And that adds to the tension and creates repression. And as a consequence, the areas where the people have gone to actually seek refuge become hotspots as well, forcing everyone, the IDPs as well as the host community, to flee further. So it's like a snowballing effect, if you like.
So given the reality that you describe, given the reality on the ground, what can be done then to help these people who are internally displaced in their own country?
Well, we urge the international community to maybe not put the emphasis on the political dialogue surrounding Syria and much more ground their response on the humanitarian needs of the population right now. And this, we have encouraged the Special Rapporteur on IDPs to actually come forward with this. We've noticed that we managed to get the Norwegian Refugee Council Secretary General on board with that, and we hope that these issues will be tackled during the next Syria Humanitarian Forum, which is taking place here in Geneva next Friday.
Guillaume Charron with the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center joining us from Geneva. Thank you very much.